Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to another video. My name's Bruce, and this is my son Alan. Today we're going to show you how we made this bow and arrow storage center. Alan's been into archery recently, and he needed a spot to store his bow and his arrows, so we whipped this up. It goes next to his practice target here. That way he can come and grab everything, go out in the yard, do his practice, and then put it all away. So let me show you how we made it. I was able to pick up some scrap cedar from a neighbor who had it left over from a project, and I've never really worked with it. It was rough, but I decided to give it a go. It was mostly flat, so I took it over to my planer to get rid of some of the rough faces so that I could then trace out the profile of the bow that we were needing to mount to this. Then I could laminate some of the pieces of this cedar together with some glue. I wanted to make some pretty quick progress on this project, so I used some quick and thick glue so that it would set up pretty quickly and I could get back to working on it. I just clamped it down on my workbench. I should have used some spare boards though, because a few of the clamps actually left marks in the face of my boards since cedar is such a soft wood. Next, I moved on to the piece that would hold the arrows. I found a little bit thicker of a piece of cedar from the cedar fencing material, and I took it over to the planer and got it smooth. Then I took it over to the joiner and got one flat edge, and then took it to the table saw and ripped the other side parallel. I didn't have a particular dimension I was going for here. I was just kind of winging it and keeping as much of the material as I could. To hold the arrows, I tilted my blade on the table saw to 30 degrees and I made a series of cuts after I measured out how far apart the arrows needed to be. I could have probably set up a dado stack or something like that, but these arrows are pretty small and each one of the slots was really only about 3 passes on the table saw with my regular blade. Not a big deal at all. My son only has 5 arrows, but I went ahead and made 7 slots in case he ends up with a few more. To add a little bit of detail, I found a graphic of a bow and arrow and engraved it on a piece of leather using my Glowforge laser engraver. Then, I just had the Glowforge cut out a small square around it. By now, the cedar planks that I glued together were dry and I could start shaping them and getting the blank down to size. I started on the jointer getting one edge flat and then ripped the other side on the table saw. I trimmed off the excess length from both the piece that would hold the bow as well as the piece that would hold the arrows at the miter saw. While I was at the miter saw, I tilted the blade to 30 degrees and cut that in each end just for a little bit of decoration. We cleaned up some of the splintery edges with a sanding block and just went really easy on the edge just to make sure that it wasn't rough. Next, it was time to cut the profile we had traced from the bow. I helped Alan cut it out with a jigsaw, and we just went nice and slow, moving the piece pretty often to make sure we could keep some of it clamped down. He's not done much with a tool like this, and with supervision, I think it was good to introduce something like the jigsaw to him. And it turns out it fit really nicely. We just had to trim off a little bit more off of the ends, and I did some of that final shaping at the bandsaw and at the sander. We put the piece of leather where we wanted it and secured it with a clamp.
Perfect.
Then we used a tiny drill bit to pre-drill some holes through the leather and into the piece that holds the arrows. We were going to be using some really tiny brass screws to secure it, and brass screws have a tendency to snap very easily, so we wanted to be sure to pre-drill a little bit. Before we added the piece of leather though, we took the 2 pieces of cedar outside and sprayed on a quick coat of spray lacquer. This will help them keep their original color and not turn quite so gray and weathered looking. And here you can see us getting a bit of screwdriver work in. Each one of these steps was a little bit of a teaching moment for me and my son, so it was pretty cool to be able to show him more and more things as the project progressed.
You want to push it down while you're turning. Twist. Push down into the board while you're turning.
There's a lot of stuff that I take for granted because I've done it so many times. Even just something as simple as applying downward pressure to a screwdriver to make sure that you're going to get enough torque is something that I was happy to be able to show to Alan.
Good. See how it's not as hard right now, but as you get closer, it'll get harder and harder. Good job, man. You got that screw in there?
Yeah.
All those brass screws?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
All that was left to do was to attach it outside where it would belong. I found where it would be a good fit, and as you can see, it's kind of tilted because of this lap siding we have on our back porch, but it turns out that is a nice fit. It will actually keep the bow rested back and keep it from falling off. There was no need for me to find a stud here because there is a backing board behind all of this lap siding. So the screws I'm using are not actually going in far enough that I need to grab a stud. I just put a couple of screws in the piece that holds the bow, and then we used a level to make sure the piece that holds the arrows was plumb.
Cool. Try it out. Put some arrows in it.
Then I secured it with another couple of screws. Neither of these things needed to hold a ton of weight. And that's really all there is to it. This project is done. Good shot. Thanks so much for checking out this video. It was a fun one. So what did you think of this, Alan?
I liked it.
Is it a good solution? I think it's going to work out really well that he can grab his bow and arrow and his target, go out there and practice, and then put it all away really quickly. Thanks so much for watching.
Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe.
Yep, what he said. I'll see you on the next one.